Happily ever after is a byline to sell Disney movies, and it's bullshit. It's complete bullshit because this is not what relationships are about. The idea that you suddenly wake up and want to find somebody, you'll manifest the one, and that you will live happily ever after is giving you an incorrect frame for what relationships are. Relationships are meant to grow you. Relationships are meant to bring you into a place to be able to see what needs to be integrated inside yourself. And your relationship, especially your romantic relationship, is going to become one of the biggest mirrors for what's going on inside you. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Fathers, Sons, Brothers podcast, where we have conversations that support men to become purpose-driven leaders and legendary lovers. I'm Gareth, and I'm stoked that you're spending some time with us today. And I'm really excited to be sharing a talk that I recently did on the stage of something called the Forged Man Brotherhood Summit. A brother called Stephen Ocean created this summit as a place for men to be able to come together and share their unique gifts or their expertise in their field of experience, and for men to be able to join that summit and to be able to level up their lives in topics like health, wellness, relationship, plant medicine, and a host of other topics that have really been supportive for men that are in this space. And a lot of the conversations inside the summit are for topics that don't get a lot of airtime. I was really excited to share my conversation and talk that I did called How to Not Step on Relationship Landmines. If you're a long-time listener to the show, you'll know how much I value relationships, not only personal relationships, as a powerful vehicle for personal growth. Meaning, if you really want to grow and evolve as a person, it's one thing to do that on your own, to go through life on your own, do your inner work, and to be able to walk through life completely integrated, feeling like things are good. It's a very different thing to be in a deep transformational partnership or a long-term marriage, and then notice how your stuff starts to come up, because your relationship is a powerful vehicle that becomes a mirror for all of the stuff that's not yet integrated inside you. And so if you have ever been in a relationship where it felt like no matter how hard you tried or no matter what your best intentions were for making that relationship work, it just seemed to keep exploding and you had no idea why that happened, take a breath, grab a coffee, and enjoy the 20 minutes that I use going through this masterclass that helps with the three things that I see, having spent more than a decade deep diving into understanding relationships through the lens of communication, sexuality, and relationship agreements. In a study that Harvard did over 85 years, they spoke to tens of thousands of men on their deathbed and asked them, what was the one thing that made your life the most meaningful? From all the data that they received over countless years, the single thing that men reflected that made their life the most meaningful was the quality and the health of the relationships that they cultivated in their lives. Let that settle in for a second. Let that just sit and sink in. Tens and thousands of data points over 85 years, one thing was consistent when reflecting on what made a meaningful life was relationships. How much time have you ever spent learning about how to do relationships well? 3 phases of relationship, how to select your partner. Have you taken any time to consider how you select the people that you choose to show up with in your friendship circles, in your romantic connections, in your building a team? Second is the doing relationship part, the maintenance and the ability to be able to do relationship well. How much time have you spent doing that in your marriage? Are you just winging it, or do you have an actual plan of how to speak about your own desires, your own boundaries that you need inside your relationship? What are your partner's desires and boundaries? What are your core wounds? How are you working with these? If you don't know these things, it's going to be very difficult to manage this middle section of relationship maintenance. And then finally, sometimes relationships come to a natural end. How do you close off those relationships and do the closure of relationships well? If you have never spent any of time thinking about this or have never got any formal training on this, please take a breath into that. It's not your fault. We don't live in a world or a society or a culture where we prioritize the importance of what it means to move into connection, maintain connection, and then come to the end of connection and close those connections off properly so that you don't leak energy and that you harness the gifts and lessons that you learn from the relationships that have come to a natural end. I'm really excited to share this conversation with you. And while I'm going through this talk, you'll notice that I'm talking about engaging in the comments. This was done live on Facebook. If you are watching this on YouTube, please feel free to paste some comments in the YouTube comments below. If you're listening to this on the podcast, the link that I share at the end of this talk to the Soulmate Safari, I will tee up in the show notes or the description of this video. Enjoyed this conversation on how to not step on relationship landmines and practically use these tools in your relationship right now. If you're new here, please take a moment to subscribe to the show. It really supports us and helps this message get out to more men who might need your support in being able to level up the relationships that matter to them most. Thanks for stopping by. See you next time. Ciao. Why do your relationships keep blowing up in your face? If you have relationship challenges and relationship explosions, I want you to know, brother, that this is not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you. It's not just a case of bad luck. It's just that you keep stepping on relationship landmines that you don't even know that they're there. Welcome to this conversation. I'm Gareth, and I'm stoked to be talking through some of the most important topics that I've learned, having spent most of my life interested in studying in relationships. And I want to start off by saying that relationships are in everything. You are in a relationship with everything in your life. You're in a relationship with your spouse. You're in a relationship with your family. You're in a relationship with your team at work. But you're also in a relationship with social media, and you're in a relationship with your body, and you're in a relationship with yourself. And the more that you understand how to come into greater alignment and greater health with your relationships, the more that you can improve all of the areas of your life that you're looking to level up. The truth is that for men and for women as well, actually, we don't get any training on relationships. There was a study in Harvard that spanned 85 years where they spoke to people and asked them what was the thing that made their life the most meaningful. It was not the amount of money that they'd made or the accolades that they achieved in their businesses. It was the quality and the health of the relationships that they cultivated in their lives. Connection is at the base of what it means to be a human being, and yet we have absolutely no training on how to do this. So if you're part of this and you are excited to hear about the 3 relationship landmines that most men stand on, that I'm going to help you bring awareness to and give you some practical tools that you can actually apply into your relationships right now, type yes in the comments below and let me know that you can hear me. I'm stoked to be going on this journey with you. And I want to start off by telling you a story. This story is about a man called Gareth who probably from even before I was a teenager, I could feel a strong sexual and erotic charge in my body. It was alive in me in a way that it felt amazing. It was just what it was. And my mother told me as a young man that I should save my sexual energy for my wife, and that would be the person that I would have intimacy with, and that would be the only place that I would explore my sexual life force. Put a pin in that. For most of my adult life, I lost my virginity when I was 13. For most of my adult life, I have spiraled in sex addiction, and I have kept that as a part of my life that I didn't want anybody else to know about. And I just want to quickly identify the difference between addiction and somebody that has a healthy active sex life, which might include multiple partners. I believe addiction is where we leak energy around things, or we feel guilt and shame around our choices rather than bringing those same choices into the light. So sex addiction for me was really about feeling shame about the fact that I was connecting with multiple women, not always being completely honest with them, and not wanting the rest of the world to know about the choices that I was making behind the scenes. I had no idea what was driving these choices. I had no clue as to what it was that made me feel this desire and make me act on these impulses. But as I start to understand relationships a little bit more, and I start to deep dive into something that I understand and I'm going to share with you now, which is my core wound, I got back to a place where I moved from one school to another. And because I moved as a young man from one school to a different school, I was the youngest boy in my school by almost an entire year when I moved to this new school. As an 8-year-old boy, where everybody else in my school was 9, I was substantially smaller because that 1 year difference when you're growing as a young person made a massive difference. And so I was feeling like I wasn't big enough, part of this group. And I really wanted to be part of this crew and be accepted by the men, the boys that were on the playground. Something happened in that year at school where I had a girlfriend and she decided that she wanted to French kiss me behind the bike shed. We went behind the bike shed, had a little kiss, and I came back to the playground and told the boys there, I was like, hey guys, I just want to let you know, I just French kissed the girl's name behind the bike shed. And for that moment, I was an absolute hero. None of the other boys in the playground had kissed another girl with tongue before. And I didn't realize it, but in that moment, I recognized that in order for me to be loved and accepted, because I didn't feel like I was enough, that all I needed to do was to prove that I could connect with women. And this became a repeating pattern in my life, and it became unconscious at that stage. And as I moved through my adult life, whenever I felt like I wasn't enough, or I felt like I needed to prove myself to the men in my life, I would do that by connecting with women as a way to try and signal my validation to the world. And I just want to share that there's nothing wrong with having multiple partners. What I want to share with you in this talk is really 3 tools that you can use to understand the importance of relationships and our sexual energy as a way to be able to reflect what we have to grow and integrate inside ourselves and to get a better handle and a way to be able to manage your relationship. So if you're excited to jump into this, let me know in the comments below, and I will jump straight into the first relationship landmine that men stand on in their relationships. Now, if you were going to build a house, where would you start? You had a piece of land, you had an idea for a house, where would you start? Hopefully you're not just going to buy some bricks, start digging up the ground and building something. You're going to start with a plan. And one of the challenges that most of us have with our relationships is we have no plan. I call it a relationship roadmap. What this means is that you might have a desire to be in partnership. Let's say you want to call in a girlfriend or perhaps even a long-term partner that becomes your wife or long-term life partner, soulmate, whatever it is that you want. Most of us are doing that unconsciously, meaning, I'm ready to be in a relationship. Get on Tinder, get on Bumble, move out into the world, go into a social environment, see somebody that arises an excitement inside you, move into a relationship with them by somehow seeing if there's a fit, and just carry on in that relationship for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, a couple of years. But that process of choosing that partner, the selection process, is very seldom linked to any sort of plan. And again, this is not your fault if you're not consciously selecting your partners. It's that you don't know how to select your partners because you had no idea that this was even part of the process of selection. But we live in a world where we have choice. And if you want to create successful relationships, just like you want to build a successful and stable house, make sure that you have a plan of what it is that you want in your partners. I suggest that you start with your values. What are the things that are important to you and things that are essential that you want to see in the relationship that you want to cultivate in your life? I want somebody who's growth minded. I want somebody who loves to travel. I want somebody who wants to be a parent. If you went through a list and created 5 to 10 core values that were essential for you in your partnership, and you used those as a way to assess the person that you're dating, you would save yourself a huge amount of time before you realize that in, let's say, year 5, your relationship's not going well, and you realize, actually, this person doesn't like to travel. I'm really keen to travel. We never really had a conversation about kids. She doesn't want to have kids. Fuck, man. You could have solved all of this and saved yourself 5 years of time. You could have saved her a whole lot of time by getting clear on what your desires are and what you want in partnership. So that's the first step of this relationship roadmap. Know your desires. Only once you know your desires are you able to set something called boundaries. Boundaries are the things that you don't want in your relationships, ways that you don't want to be treated, things that when they show up in your partner would be things that are not a yes for you. You don't have to be in a relationship with people because you've said yes to them, but it's your responsibility to know what you want, your desires, and then to be able to clearly communicate the things that you don't want. If your partner speaks badly to you, if they're continually showing up late, if they're not supportive of the work that you're doing, any of these things that would identify as red flags should be articulated as boundaries, and you should know what these are so that when you see them in your relationships and you have the self-worth to be able to communicate what you want and what you don't want, you can move your relationship into a path that really supports you to what it is that you want to cultivate in your life. So, know what you want, know how to communicate your desires and your boundaries. And then the last one I want to share with you is know what your core wounds are. Hey, FSB crew, a quick message to say 97% of you who watch or consume this podcast are not subscribed. Subscribing to the show really supports us to be able to grow and reach more people, as well as include and improve the quality and caliber of guests that we have on this show. Our goal is to get this number down to 70%. And so if you have ever received any value from the content and conversations on this podcast, please consider subscribing. It really supports us and the work that we're doing. Now, back to the show. All of us have core wounds. There's nothing wrong with you. This is a function of being born into a human body, born to imperfect parents, born into a culture that continually tells you that you're not enough. And it's your responsibility to know what your core wounds are, to know what your partner's core wounds are so that you can support them in their choices and recognize them when they explode in the relationship, and also realize that your relationship is the vehicle that you use to be able to identify these core wounds. So how does this look? I've now identified in myself that this feeling of not being enough. Remember the playground where I was feeling like I was the youngest in my school, the smallest kid on the playground. How do I feel like I'm going to fit in? There's some part of me that's going, Gareth, you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough. Connect with a woman, suddenly I'm enough. It's important for me to know that this core wound of not enough is alive in me. I'm continually working on it. It shows up from time to time, and it continues to show up in my current relationship. And if you know what those core wounds are and you know what they are in your partner, you have the ability to be able to recognize them and skillfully navigate your way through some of these landmines that are going to come up in partnership. So the relationship roadmap consists of knowing your desires, knowing your boundaries, and knowing your core wounds, and being able to communicate these with your partner. The second relationship landmine that most men come up against is the inability to recognize that relationships are a mirror for what's happening inside ourselves. And they lived happily ever after. Anybody heard that before? Let me know in the comments if you've ever heard that. Also, let me know where you heard that. Happily ever after is a byline to sell Disney movies. And it's bullshit. It's complete bullshit, because this is not what relationships are about. The idea that you suddenly wake up and want to find somebody, you'll manifest the one, and that you will live happily ever after is giving you an incorrect frame for what relationships are. Relationships are meant to grow you. Relationships are meant to bring you into a place to be able to see what needs to be integrated inside yourself. And your relationship, especially your romantic relationship, is going to become one of the biggest mirrors for what's going on inside you. So if you get into a relationship, you move through what I call the first phase, which is the new relationship energy. This is super strong energy. You're alive. The sex is juicy. You're showing the best part of yourself. They're showing the best part of themselves to you. And you flow, and the relationship goes like that for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, maybe even a couple of years. But at some point, this relationship is going to become a mirror for what's unintegrated or what needs to be healed inside you, these core wounds that I spoke about in the first landmine. This is going to be your work to do in your relationships. And so if you are the type of person that's harsh with yourself, you're going to start to see that you attract those types of people into your life. If you're the type of person that potentially avoids doing any emotional work and you don't recognize this inside yourself, this emotion is going to start to build up, and your relationship is going to be the trigger that's going to make this landmine explode, and you're going to find yourself in a place that makes it look like the person that you're in relationship with is bringing up all your challenges and all the stuff, but you don't even realize it's you. You think it's them. And so this is really the part that I want you to recognize, is that your relationship is going to be a really strong mirror for what's alive inside you now. So I want you to let me know, what is it that you think that is alive inside you now that is being reflected back to you in your relationships? I want to ask you the question in another way. What's a recurring relationship pattern that you see in your relationships that keeps coming up over and over again? The other person's jealous, or the other person doesn't hear you. Whatever those things are, let me know in the comments of what this is, and I'm going to actually show up in these comments afterwards. So whether you're watching this live or on the replay, put this in the comments and I'll jump in there and support you after this. But I want you to remember, the second landmine is your relationships are going to start to mirror back to you exactly what needs to be healed and integrated inside yourself. So when you move into a relationship and this stuff comes up, this is a feature, not a bug. There's no happily ever after. This is the relationship working. The medicine is working of being in a relationship, and it's starting to bring up what's alive inside you and what needs to be integrated inside you. So, landmine number 1, understand that there needs to be a relationship map, a plan to let you know where you're going. The recognition that your relationship is going to be a mirror of everything that feels like it's inside you. And the third one that I want to speak to is recognizing that in order for you to show up fully in your relationship is to show up fully and self-integrated in your sexual expression. If you're a brother that's on this journey of personal development and men's work, I have no doubt you've heard the importance of self-responsibility, meaning you take responsibility for your own stuff, you take responsibility for what's showing up in your life, you take responsibility for your personal work, and I want you to bring this theme into your relationships. Your ability to show up sexually activated in your relationship is your responsibility. Many of us have this wrong. And again, this is not your fault. You haven't been taught this stuff. But basically what happens is we come to our partners and we're like, okay, let's get this on. How is this going to unfold? How are you going to make me get sexually activated? It's not your partner's responsibility for you to get turned on. This is your responsibility for you to have a healthy practice to understand how to come to your relationships self-activated. It's the self-responsibility, self-activated. Now, I just want to share what this looks like for a lot of men. If you have a masturbation practice where you jerk off thinking about past lovers, fantasizing about people that you haven't been with yet, or watching porn, what you're doing is you're outsourcing your pleasure and you're outsourcing your ability to become self-activated to the porn or to your partner or to the fantasy. And in order for you to be able to reclaim this activation, to be self-activated, is to develop a healthy self-pleasuring practice. This is going to sound fucking out there to some of you, but just hold this for a second in your awareness. Take a moment to date yourself. The goal here is to be your own best lover, because when you're self-activated, fully in love with yourself, completely turned on by yourself, that's when you attract somebody who is feeling and vibrating the same way into your life. And so practically, how can you do this? Date yourself. Give yourself the opportunity to cultivate a self-activated, self-pleasuring practice that instead of doing what I've always done, old habits, old patterns, neuro pathways firing in the brain of this is how I get turned on. Let all of that go. Create half an hour for yourself, and instead of doing, move into being. Being means listening to your body. Feel what feels pleasurable in your body. Feel what your body wants. As opposed to driving the entire experience from your mind, let yourself drop back into your body and feel what your body wants. What feels pleasurable for you? Yes, it can include some genital touch. Yes, it can include some stimulation of your cock, and it can even include ejaculation. But I want you to move through this practice and this half an hour by listening to your body and activating yourself, as opposed to watching porn, running fantasy, or leaving it to be the responsibility of your partner. This personal self-activation practice is probably the most powerful key that you have to becoming your best lover, your own best lover, and also to be self-activated and take the responsibility for your sexual life force. So you're not outsourcing your pleasure and you're not outsourcing your ability to get turned on to the partners that show up in your life. So, brothers, these are just 3 of the powerful tools and components that you can use to help identify the parts of your relationship where you might be having explosions coming up and you have no idea why. Relationships are challenging and they're super fucking beautiful. And from what I understand, it's one of the most powerful tools for your personal development. Meaning, if you want to grow as a man, if you want to show up more fully for your money game, for your health, for your wealth, for your family, for your mission that you're serving, your relationship is probably one of the most powerful tools that you can use to help level up and do the inner work that you don't have access to if you're not in a relationship. But if you're navigating your relationships without the right tools, it's the same as trying to build a house without the plan of exactly what you want that house to look like. You need to have the tools and the support to be able to support you, to be able to navigate these relationships without stepping on the landmines that are there, that are part of the process of transformation of relationship and partnership. So, if you've made it to the end of this video, I want to say thank you so much. You're clearly a brother who is committed to your personal development and you take your relationship seriously. So I want to say thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you're interested in joining me on a 30-minute relationship masterclass that I call the Soulmate Safari, this is a short presentation that I put together that dives a little bit deeper into some of these themes that I share with you here. Just type yes in the comments below and I'll send you a DM with the link to access that free training. It's super powerful. We've had thousands of men go through this training, and it really is like another layer deeper into these themes of understanding what are the tools that you need to be able to navigate your relationships well. Thank you for showing up to this. I really appreciate you, brother. Thank you for being part of the ceremony, and to all of those that have been part of this process of putting this together. Type yes in the comments below. I'll show up in the comments, and thank you for being part of this. Till next time. Ciao.